Good evening, everybody. Anyone here for the bondage class? Wrong room. Wrong room. They're across the way. Good evening. I'm Christina Barr. I'm the Executive Director of Nevada Humanities, and it's an honor to be here with all of you this evening to welcome in our new exhibition, Humanities Heart to Heart, Our Pandemic Stories. I'm curious to know who in this room actually contributed to the project, Humanities Heart to Heart. Yes. For those of you, well, first of all, thank you. This is really about you. So thank you for being here tonight. I'm really grateful for that. And we're going to hear a lot more about that in a few minutes. I just have some housekeeping and some gratitude to express tonight. For those of you who don't know about Nevada Humanities, we're Nevada's Humanities Council. Just like the Arts Council, there's also a Humanities Council in the state. We are twins separated at birth. And we're a nonprofit affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. And we work to connect and transform communities by sharing and amplifying the stories, ideas, experiences, and traditions of the people of Nevada. So that's what we do. And that's what you see here tonight, writ large, all over the walls in our gallery space. And we do this all over the state. We work in every corner of the state, which we're very proud of. And you can find out more about our work at nevadahumanities.org, and I encourage you to go check that out and, of course, see the bigger project that we're going to hear a little bit more about tonight. This exhibition series is based here in Las Vegas, of course, and produces 6 originally curated exhibitions each year that showcase the work of Nevada artists, writers, photographers, journalists, creative thinkers, and organizations that explore and articulate a sense of place here in the Silver State. So this exhibition is one of a series that we do year-round. And I think all of you know Bobby Ann Howell. Where is Bobby Ann? She escaped. No, there she is in the back. I wanted to honor Bobby Ann because this exhibition series is her baby, and every 2 months she births a new one, and we're very grateful for that. She does an amazing job. So let's hear it for Bobby Ann. I also wanted to give you a heads up that tonight we will be broadcasting what we're doing right here in this room today on Facebook Live. I think we are live on Facebook Live at this very moment, so hello to everyone. And then we're also recording the program, and we're going to be putting it on our website. So just a heads up to that. We wanted people to have a chance to hear more about this project and this exhibition and how it came to be and what it means to us across the state as well. I'd like to acknowledge 3 very important people who are here with us tonight. We can't do the work that we do without community input and collaboration, and also support from our elected officials who support our work. I'd like to acknowledge Assemblywoman Sarah Peters, representing District 24 in Washoe County. Her mother-in-law, Questa Lakes, contributed to the exhibition, and her father, Theo McCormick, is featured in the sunset silhouette photo in the gallery. So when you go over to the gallery space, please take a moment and take a look at that. Also, Taylor Murdoch, who's the regional representative in Senator Jackie Rosen's office. And we had an opportunity to say hello earlier to D.L. Tolada, who's the regional representative in Senator Cortez Masto's office as well. So a warm thank you for all of you for being here tonight. I also want to thank all of the people who came together to make the Humanities Heart to Heart program and the Humanities Heart to Heart, Our Pandemic Stories exhibition possible. This program, as I said, is really community-based. It's about all of you, and the list of supporters is long. But I wanted to thank a handful of organizations that came forward to contribute financial support to help make this program happen, especially the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Nevada Arts Council, the National Endowment for the Arts, and Renown Health. Thank you so much for your support. And finally, I would like to introduce Kathleen Kuo, who is Nevada Humanities Program Manager here in Las Vegas and the Director of the Humanities Heart to Heart program and the Curator of Heart to Heart, Our Pandemic Stories exhibition. Kathleen's going to speak a little bit about the program and how it came to be, so please welcome Kathleen Kuo.
Well, before I start, can we get stools for the 3 of you? This is about half an hour. I don't want you to stand for half an hour. So, okay. Are you sure? Okay. We'll bring one over. You can fight over that one stool. Okay, well, hello everyone. Thank you all so much for being here with us tonight for our exhibition reception for Heart to Heart, Our Pandemic Stories. I recognize many of you in the audience, which is so exciting after having only ever seen you, through your headshots that you sent to me or that I pestered you for. So thank you. So before I go any further tonight, I just wanted to first acknowledge that tonight here in Las Vegas, I am standing in this room with others upon the traditional homelands of the Nuvi, the Southern Paiute people. I wanted to express my gratitude to the communities of this region, for those who have stewarded it for generations, and for the opportunity to learn and work with others upon this land. The COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated the challenges and issues faced by people all over the world, and in particular, the majority of the indigenous peoples around the world, such as poverty, access to healthcare, access to technological services and remote educational opportunities, food insecurity, discrimination, and more. So as you walk through our gallery tonight and after you leave, I hope that all of you are encouraged to continue learning about the history of this land, the people who have worked and lived here since time immemorial, and to acknowledge and think about what you can do to combat the historical and present realities of colonialism. So since the beginning of the pandemic, we've had almost 1 million reported cases in Nevada and over 11,000 reported deaths. The population of Nevada is a little over 3 million, and for Humanities Heart to Heart, we had a little less, about 270 contributors. So I often think about how for every one story told on our website, there's 10,000 more that are untold. And all of them contain multitudes. All of them link back to our shared humanity. So I just wanted to take, again, a moment of silence to commemorate those losses of our loved ones, family and friends, those we lost during the pandemic, and also for those most recently that I learned who we lost who wrote for Humanities Heart to Heart. Thank you. I'm trying not to cry. So thank you for bearing with me. All right, so I'm going to start with a rhetorical question, and this is one that I hope that you'll keep in the back of your mind tonight as you all listen. And that is, when is the last time any of you sat down for a true heart-to-heart? When I say true heart-to-heart, I mean a serious one-on-one conversation with a loved one or a trusted friend, where you have the space to talk earnestly and honestly about something that's on your mind. When we live in such a fast-paced world, I think that finding the courage to first seek someone out, but also to have the compassion and patience to be the person on the other end, it takes a lot of bravery, vulnerability, and strength. We need more heart-to-hearts in our world right now. And this is really the impetus for our Humanities Heart to Heart program back in 2020, at the beginning of this pandemic. I joined Nevada Humanities in April 2020, and I've been working remotely from the very beginning. This was still during lockdown, a month after the first reported case of the coronavirus in Nevada. Can any of you still remember how you felt during that time? When the streets were all but empty, parts of the strip were boarded up, toilet paper and hand sanitizer were more valuable than printer ink. No one knew what would happen next. At Nevada Humanities, we pride ourselves on working to connect and transform communities. But how do you connect people when you can no longer gather safely together in person, when you feel so cut off and isolated? At this time, early in the pandemic, you may remember that we are still being bombarded daily with conflicting messages on all sides. We knew that we didn't want to add more interference into the mix, but we wanted to still find a way to connect to people we serve, the people of Nevada. We wanted to find a way to still create spaces for healing, participation, and demonstrate the important role that the humanities still hold for us all during a pandemic. So this is where Humanities Heart to Heart was born. We envisioned a place online, our website, but also our social media platforms, where people could share their stories of what it was like to navigate everyday life during COVID-19. Online, people could still gather, feel connected, comment, and share to feel included, that you were being seen and heard, that we were there, that we cared about your stories and your well-being. And in sharing your stories, hopefully there would be others who would take the time to learn about a life and perspective outside their own, feel less lonely and isolated, and if they felt so inclined, share a piece of their own story with us in turn. So it might be because I was new to Nevada Humanities at that time, and also fairly new to Nevada in general, having moved here in July 2019. So I was only here about 7 months before everything shut down. So when I was tasked with reaching out and curating stories for this program, I really looked to as many places as I could. I asked friends of those friends. I went deep down the Google rabbit hole to find people across Nevada who might have a story to tell. Anyone and everyone is welcome and always has been. It was important to me and our organization to share and highlight a wide range of voices. Many of the people whose work is in our gallery today, you have probably never shown your work in an exhibition or a physical space such as this one before. Not everyone is an established artist or a poet, a writer or a photographer. Many of you work 9-to-5 jobs as administrative staff, cafe managers, you're full-time parents and caretakers, students, healthcare professionals, retirees, more. Just as the pandemic affected everyone, everyone had and has a story to tell. We wanted Humanities Heart to Heart to not just be a platform for sharing these stories, but also one that would archive them for the future, for us to learn from, and for us to draw inspiration and strength from when we needed it. Another important feature of Humanities Heart to Heart is that we've always wanted to include all types of storytelling, to include modes of storytelling that weren't limited to just text essays, but that would also welcome poetry, art, audio and video, and more. Some people weren't comfortable writing personal pieces, which is fine, and so we'll also find pieces that are more academic in scope, and those tell us about epidemics and pandemics of the past, and attempt to make sense of the future. Whatever the case, we wanted this to be a place where we could share meaningful, quality stories and contribute to the healing of our communities across the state and connect people during a time of crisis and uncertainty. Humanities Heart to Heart has documented pregnancy and birth, engagement, marriages, divorces, saying goodbye to loved ones, not being able to say goodbye to loved ones in person, unemployment, homelessness, mental health and physical health, gender dysphoria, eating disorders, other issues that are deeply important to us. Something unexpected, but perhaps not unsurprising, that we discovered as we asked people to write about their experiences during a pandemic is that within these reflections, we also find snapshots of events that happened locally, nationwide, and around the world that affected us all. The global protest movements against police brutality and racial injustice, our contested political elections here in the United States, and the events that have followed since November 3rd, 2020, and then January 6th, 2021. The rise in hate crimes against Asians and Asian Americans that are said to have gone up anywhere from 44 to 73 to 339% over the last few years that have all been exacerbated by the pandemic and other political rhetoric. All this and more can be found within the stories told in Humanities Heart to Heart as our contributors lay bare what mattered most to them at the time of writing and what they felt needed to be shared with others as a part of their heart to heart. I quoted a number at the very beginning of this talk, which is that for every story told on our website, I always think about how there's at least 10,000 more left untold about what it was like to be a Nevadan or live in Nevada during the pandemic. I think a lot about all of the phone calls and emails and Zoom conversations I've had since early 2020, of the stories missing from the people I talked to over the last few years who changed their minds about writing because of the immense stress they were under, of those who laid bare their grief and anger at me, told me they could not be a part of this when I reached out because of what they endured, of the people I pass in the streets, and I wonder what complex stories they have to share and what they have had to endure themselves. I think about the people who moved here during the pandemic, as well as the people who moved away, including other contributors to this program. At some point, I started to think that because of this work that I was doing, that I could never escape the pandemic, and that it had become me, in a sense, as I listened and learned, grieved and mourned, celebrated and loved alongside these hundreds of strangers whose stories are now also forever a part of my own. I know this program and the exhibition is by no means a complete picture of the Nevadan experience, but what I do hope is that as people read and listen online and in person, is that we find elements of our shared humanity across all of these pieces. I wish we had 10 times the space of this gallery to share and honor the stories of every single person who contributed to our program and beyond. But we have about, today in our exhibition, about a fifth of those stories with us. And it's okay. And let me tell you, it's not easy to round up and manage, 50 plus moving pieces and people, each with their own idiosyncrasies when it comes to display and description. There are some pieces submitted for our exhibition that might not be physically displayed here in our gallery, but will have a place in our online exhibition. So for those of you contributors who wonder why you don't see your piece up yet, we'll try to have them online. And of course, everything is archived on Humanities Heart to Heart. So before I talk a little bit about some of the heart-to-hearts you'll find today in our physical exhibition and our online one once it's ready, I just wanted to briefly gloss over some of the stories that didn't make it, but that you can still find the full text of on our website. So just a few. Lily wrote a story for us in July 2020. She shared a photographic essay as her contribution. I've always been struck by this excerpt and image, this mental image from her piece. She wrote, "My sister gave birth to a baby boy shortly before the lockdown in Las Vegas began. We spent the early days apart, isolating on opposite ends of the city. We interacted mostly through supply runs, where I would drop off home-cooked meals and water on a chair at her door. In return, my sister would leave photos of her son in a plastic bag. I would always wait in my car for the front door to open, hoping to catch a glimpse of my sister and her family inside. Months later, we got to see each other face to face from a safe distance at her door." In August 2020, Zonil shared a story with us, one that could have only happened during the pandemic, where he described moving in with his girlfriend of a little over a year and her parents when the shelter-in-place orders were given in mid-March. This is probably one of my favorite stories, mostly because there's 2 dogs, and you can see dog pictures throughout. But you might be happy to know that since then, they have gotten married and they've bought a house together as an update to that piece. So go say hi to Zonil if you know him and congratulate him. There's Meredith, whose photo of the baseball bat next to her front door is an image that will always stick with you. She writes about the reports of anti-Asian violence that filled the news and the concerns of her father as she set out on her daily walks. Rakisha is a UNLV student who lost her father in April 2020, and she was not able to attend his funeral because of the pandemic. Leela, the founder of Nevada Smiles, reminds us of the importance of visual communication and how masks, as important as they are for keeping us safe, can also impair our abilities to communicate on an equal level with those with hearing loss, autism, and other impairments during the pandemic. There's so much more I could say. I could talk about these stories for hours and hours on end, but I'll leave that to you today in the audience for when you have time to sit down and consider yourself on the receiving end of these heart-to-hearts online. Some of you may have already had a chance to walk around and see your pieces and others up in our gallery. Some of you may never have before heard of Humanities Heart to Heart, or even me, or Nevada Humanities until earlier this week. But after this talk, I hope that whether you're sitting with me in person or tuning in online, you'll view the works that are hanging up in our gallery and online space once it's ready with fresh and compassionate eyes that are curious and empathetic. Almost every piece on display in our physical exhibition will have an accompanying QR code that will take you back to the original text of that person's heart-to-heart so you can learn more. So while I wish I could speak about every single person and piece from our exhibition today, I'm just going to talk about just a few, so when you go back in there, you can see these again with fresh eyes. Candace Garlock is an artist and educator who wrote a piece entitled For the Birds. This is a piece about isolation where she was not able to see her beloved grandkids, but she found comfort in all the different birds outside her living room window. She spent hours on her sofa watching the birds, being thankful for being alive. The birds became her muses. So those 2 ceramic birds that you see in the exhibition, she created those earlier as sculptures in 2019, but they also feature later as characters in the pieces that she created for the exhibition. She wrote that during the pandemic, I myself got sick. All I could do was sleep and concentrate on breathing. My daughter and sister texted every hour, maybe more than that, making sure I was keeping up with my breathing exercises and sleeping sitting up. I was on my favorite sofa in front of the window watching the birds again. The birds are all the time. We're there all the time now. The chattering was a peaceful reminder that life continues and I would get through this. After this experience, I did another print, a reminder of our fragilities, our journeys together. Waiting 2, which is in our exhibition, still held the birds in the windows. Outside was a woven grid, searching for interconnectedness. The birds, the pandemic belongs to them, and to them I say thank you for helping me find happiness in a world turned upside down. So when you go see Candace's piece, I hope you keep this in mind. We have a pair of jeans that some of you may be wondering about. Those come from an artist named Kristen Franson Orr, who comes from Spring Creek, Nevada. Her Heart to Heart is entitled Progress in the Paradox of Time. Kristen took an online Zen stitching class during the pandemic. It was based on a historic Japanese style of mending called sashiko, which became a form of meditation for her. So she shares in her piece, amongst other things, how when her favorite pair of jeans ripped, she heard about something that was called visible mending, and sashiko uses a simple running stitch about a 1/4 inch long and repeating patterns. So she mended that hole in her jeans, and then she just kept stitching. So I think it's really beautiful to look at Kristen's piece, those pair of jeans with fresh eyes when you go into the gallery, think of her story, and think of the patience and the work it takes to make each individual little stitch one at a time, the love that goes into a piece such as this one, and even the lessons we can take away from sashiko and visible mending. We can acknowledge the rips and tears in our lives and find a way to still thoughtfully create a beautiful piece out of something that might otherwise have been disregarded and thrown away or ignored. Leslie Ventura, when I reached out about the exhibition, asked if she could instead share an updated piece of writing. This is a tribute to her father, who passed away shortly after she wrote her piece for us to honor his memory. And so you'll find her written update in our gallery alongside 3 photos of him. We have a little special space on our wall for Leslie's father. We have local artist and photographer Julia Gray, who shared a photo of a hummingbird with us. Those birds have kept her company during isolation, and she spent thousands of hours with different species of hummingbirds, training them for her portraits and photographing them. And I have some of her work on display in my office, so every day when I walk into my office at home, I'm reminded of how generous she is and her patience and love for what she does. We have local poet and librarian Emily Wershing's beautifully crafted zines, which, yes, you can absolutely pick up and touch and go through. They're on the table in the gallery next to the TV. We have above our window one of fiber artist Jen Graham's fabric lawn signs that she created during the pandemic. In her piece entitled For Now We Wait, she writes, I started making fabric lawn signs to share brief messages with anyone who happened to wander by my house. I'm a fiber artist, and I primarily make political art. My work is my way as an anti-social homebody to speak up, to add to the conversation, and hopefully contribute to positive change. When I have something to say, I make a new piece. So, safe at home but afraid of the world, I decided to create a kind of postcard to the neighborhood in the form of a lawn sign. So you can see all the other lawn signs on her website, but also on our webpage. So finally, I'm going to share, this is a small photo. I love all of our small pieces because they always link to something bigger. There's a small photo from Ashley Warren, who is in Reno. Her Heart to Heart really resonated with me. I think during the early days of the pandemic, in our isolation, we all wondered, what can we do to help other people? So in her piece, which is entitled My Victory Garden, she writes, early in the pandemic, I saw posts on social media comparing the pandemic to a war. It seemed frivolous. A viral social media post read, your grandparents were called to war. You're being called to sit on a couch. Months later, when staying at home seems a monumental ask for some, I wonder if that sort of sentiment helped in those early days when, for such a brief time, our communities worked together to get through those haunting first weeks. It's both true and not true that a pandemic is a war. In this war of invisible pathogens and a bigger war of a world unable to band together in solidarity, those who maintain our society with health care and access to goods are the frontline soldiers. But I am no such person. I'm just a writer. What purpose is an artist in wartime? This has been a defining question in my life. Perhaps I'm a survivor in the way we all are right now. I've often questioned my career, knowing I should have been a physician or a farmer or done something useful. Writing, depending on the writer, is either an act of revolution or the ultimate privilege. But to undermine the work of writers during a war undermines the sacrifices journalists have made traveling to war zones, the brave souls who passed secret messages to encode, the voices who relayed news on the radio waves. In truth, I've had a hard time writing these past few months. Instead, I put my energy toward supporting my friends who are writers, alleviating burdens where I can so they can put words on the page. They say the same things back to me. I feel useless. We find ways to contribute to our communities, for it's not just the pandemic that overshadows us now, but ever-present veils of violence and injustice. Alone together, we find our purposes during wartime, and mine has become gardening. So Ashley's words really resonated with me. That's why I wanted to share them. So as you can tell, a piece of my heart has been invested with every single person who reached out to me and every single person who contributed. Every piece links back to a greater story. Literally, you can scan that QR code to find the other story. And that in turn links to a person, just like you, the person next to you. All of us contain multitudes. So now I'm going to come to the ending of my talk, but because I'm bad at endings and goodbyes, I'm actually just going to read 2 endings from other heart-to-heart contributors. So bear with me. This was the ending to Professor Josh Webster's piece, We Are Legend, that was published on our website in July 2020. This is our inaugural launch of the Humanities Heart-to-Heart program. I first reached out to Josh in May 2020, and although this was one of our first pieces, it's always stuck with me since the moment I read it. So I hope that those of you in the audience today will go back and find this on our website afterwards and either read the full text or listen to the recording that he specially made for us for this exhibition. This is from his piece from the ending. The knowledge of the separation between yourself and another sharpens isolation to a knife point. And in such isolation, overwhelmed with sorrow and fear for the world outside my door, I fell silent. This is the first non-work writing I've completed since COVID-19 arrived. I'm not alone. I'm sure many find themselves hollowed out and unable to think past the grim delirium of the present days. I can speak to moments, to the current events, but when it comes to the larger questions, I don't have words. And we need them as the question lingers. What will we, in our communities and our world, become now? It demands an answer, but not one ready on our tongues or in our pens. Even though we don't have an answer, we are finding a story, I think. The Black Lives Matter protests, activism for economic, medical, and individual equality, acts of kindness and care throughout the pandemic point to a coalescing, powerful narrative for a humane world, a story of humanity based not in authority or wealth, but in shared community, respect, and resources. This tale of an egalitarian world is growing, and while no storyteller starts with all the details, we trust that we will find them as we go. On this road, expect loss, work for joy, expect failures, work for triumphs, expect conflict, work for concordance. The future isn't yet written or spoken for. Inside or outside, to ourselves and to others, we need to tell a humane story of the humane world that we will make. No one is Robert Neville. There will be no last man and no enemy beyond our doors except our inclinations to fear, ignorance, confusion, and the atrocities such inclinations drive us to if we don't accept their presence in our lives and strive for better. There are no heroes but ourselves in our immeasurable capacity for compassion, kindness, and tenacity in the face of injustice and disaster. Regardless of the times, with or without precedent, we have nothing but each other, but on the last page and all the pages along the way. That is everything. That's the ending to his piece, and it's absolutely beautiful. All of his writing is. The next ending I want to share with you brings us full circle. It was one of our most recent. This was written by a brilliant third-year student from the Davidson Academy in Reno. She is one of our youngest Humanities Heart-to-Heart participants, so I wanted to thank her, Corinna, for writing this. And also a huge thank you to our teacher and previous Humanities Heart-to-Heart contributor, Michelle O'Coin-Waite, who put us in touch. So this excerpt was taken from the end of Corinna's piece entitled Shoes. In my mind, although I love all of your pieces, this is one of the best written texts I've ever read, and this is something I would not have been able to do at her age. I am 12. It is the last school day before spring break at my first year at a new school. People around me keep mentioning some type of virus that's spreading quickly, but I ignore it like I do every other piece of bad news I hear. One person even starts calling me coronavirus. I tell them to stop, and they do, but it makes me wonder how grand scale it really is if people are still talking about it weeks later after we heard about it. Our week-long spring break turns into 2 weeks, 3, 4, until we restart school on our computers. An entire month goes by in which I stay within the confines of my house and backyard, and I hope it will be over when this school year ends. It isn't. In the fall, days turn to weeks, weeks turn to months, until I realize that this entire year will also be spent at my desk, facing the house across the street and my 3 half-dead cacti in a windowsill. I lose track of time and effort I spend working because every day is the same as the last, spent entirely in my room except for when I eat. The loneliness sometimes overwhelms me, which I notice when I lose my focus in class for over half an hour. Even my motivation is gone because I see no end in sight. Every day is spent entirely working and forcing myself to feel stronger than my stress, and consistent lack of sleep spent instead working and working. Each morning, I'm just excited to go to bed that evening. Every few days, I'm again overwhelmed. I can't focus because I'm stressed, but I'm stressed because I can't focus, and the work keeps piling up. There's never any free time for me to spend because I keep working, and I feel guilty when I go to sleep because I never get as much done as I had hoped. Some mornings, I find tens of tissue wads kicked under my bed because I didn't feel like throwing them away the night before. I can't take it anymore. I can't even look at myself in the mirror and recognize who's looking back. I don't have such dark under eyes. I don't have such swollen eyelids. I don't have such greasy hair that I have to braid it every day for it not to show. When school is finally over, my exams taken, and my grades finalized, I feel free and as though I can take a breath again. Although it's a slow process, I start seeing the good parts of myself instead of only my faults, so I take care to avoid my own destruction as I better myself. In the summer, I cut my hair even shorter to change even more from the person who I was, and I am back in my school Converse shoes again, remembering the nice light feel of them on my feet, which I have missed for over a year. Maybe this is what it means to be human, to rely on a stable base in our lives and fidget until we find it again, to let struggles in our lives guide us until we find that base again, and to return stronger than ever before. This was written by a 15-year-old. So you really need to go and read the rest of her piece. So I think I lied a little bit. I think I'm going to read just one more ending. That's my own, from the own Heart to Heart I wrote in December 2020-21, and then I promise that's it. You can go explore the gallery. But I wrote a Heart to Heart that's called Will You Remember? And I think for everyone in this audience who wrote a piece, you might know how hard it was to start from the beginning and figure out where am I going to pull from? So that's how I felt, and it was very difficult. So now I really empathize with all of you. So here's the ending to my Heart to Heart, and this is a way to close my exhibition talk with you all tonight. Since July 2020, I've read and listened to hundreds of stories about what it's been like to experience and live through the COVID-19 pandemic. There have been days when I've had to push aside the laptop and take an extended break after an especially emotional phone call or email exchange with a potential contributor. Countless stories are missing from our Humanities Heart to Heart page, from those I've been unable to make contact with, from those who have dropped contact, from those who have had to bow out due to emergencies or the stress of just getting by day to day and more. I hold on to those shreds of conversations, and I imagine the rest of what has been left unsaid. Now, whenever I see other people, I can't help myself from wondering and imagining what their story is and what they must be going through. With this in mind, the least any of us can do during this time is to extend grace, patience, and compassion to our fellow human beings. I wanted to share a bit of my own story to close out the year 2021. I found that putting pen to paper to express my own complicated feelings in a publicly accessible and appropriate manner was tremendously difficult. Part of this difficulty came in trying to figure out what exactly I would say and where I would start. Decision paralysis notwithstanding, I also had to confront my own personal roadblocks of worrying whether this would be good enough or would be enough. Many of us tell our story, or many of us tell ourselves and stop ourselves at the cusp of creation with the excuse of, I'm not a writer, I'm not a poet, I'm not a musician, I'm not ... But setting aside those labels, we can still write and create for ourselves, if not for others. We all have to start somewhere. And this is what I try to tell myself, at least. If I had written this 6 months ago or 6 months in the future, I know this piece would take on a completely different form. In the end, what came out ended up being a prose poem of sorts. I tried my best to write straight from the heart, without any pretension or hesitation. I wasn't sure what meandering journey my thoughts would take. I did know from the start that the Tears and Rain monologue from the film Blade Runner was something that I had to include. To me, this particular phrase has always struck an emotional chord of loss and longing. Innumerable moments and memories of my life are already gone. When I am gone, who will remember me and remember them? Despite all that we do and create, no one can ever truly understand and experience the life of another. So my biggest takeaway from the pandemic is that our time here is precious. It's easy to take what we have for granted, but as the past 2 years have demonstrated, so much of our way of life and what we can have can be taken away from us in a heartbeat. The pandemic helped me to reconsider my life priorities and to pause. really pause and to treasure the things and the people that matter the most to me. I don't know what 2022 will bring, but I hope that by this time next year, we'll have come a step closer to the end of the pandemic and we'll all be in a better place. So many thanks to you, the reader, our community of readers, for staying with us through this time and being a part of the storytelling journey. What will you remember from this time? So that's what I wrote last year, December 21, and here we are in October 2022, and I can't believe it. So I'm just going to end by saying, you know, if you haven't already written a heart-to-heart for us, shared a piece of artwork, a poem, a photograph, that you're inspired to do so when you go home tonight, or for those watching online, after you turn off your computer or your phone, you can email me. You can find my information on our nevadahumanities.org website, and you can always find more information there. So I just want to thank everyone from the bottom of my heart, all of our Humanities Heart-to-Heart contributors. There's so many of you here tonight. It's really wonderful to see you in attendance. To everyone in the audience today, online or in person, who is able to come and be here, to my coworkers, to everyone who's given their time to listen to the story of others. So really, like I said at the beginning, take some time for a heart-to-heart with a loved one, especially if you haven't ever done it before. It's really worth it. So finally, if you have any questions, I would love to continue this conversation with you here in the gallery across the way. So please stay in touch, stay safe, and please know that I appreciate all of you.
Thank you, guys. We're going to head over to the gallery, so let's continue the conversation over there, and we'll see you there. Thank you, Kathleen.